show you how to solve quadratic inequalities. In the first question, it says solve x squared minus 5x minus 14 is greater than 0. So what I would encourage you to do in a question like this is to do a sketch of the quadratic and then in particular work out where it crosses the x-axis, okay? So I'm going to do that by first writing this quadratic as an equation so that y is equal to x squared minus 5x minus 14. Now remember I just said it's important to identify where the quadratic crosses the x-axis. Now a graph always crosses the x-axis when y is equal to 0. So I'm going to replace y with 0. So that 0 is equal to x squared minus 5x minus 14. And now I'm just solving this quadratic equation. Okay, so you could use the quadratic formula, or this is quite a nice one, we can factorize this one. Okay, so I'm going to pop that quadratic now into brackets. So we're going to put in the x values first, so the x multiplied by x gives me the x squared. Now these two numbers here, they have to multiply to give negative 14, and they have to add together to give negative 5. So it should be negative 7 and positive 2. So if I solve this equation, I know the x values are positive 7 or negative 2. Okay, so we've solved the quadratic, but remember we're solving an inequality. Okay, there's no inequality symbol here, so we haven't finished yet. So I'm now going to do my little sketch of the quadratic. So it's positive x squared, so it's going to be this way. Had it been negative x squared, it would have been the other way up, okay? And it crosses the x-axis at positive 7 and negative 2. So I'm just going to label those numbers on there. Now in the question, it says that the quadratic is greater than 0. So when we look at our graph, we're interested in everything that's greater than 0. So everything above the x-axis, okay? Because that is when y is greater than 0. If it had been the other way around, the inequality, so smaller than 0, we would have been interested in everything below the x-axis instead. So if we take this value here, when x is equal to negative 2, can you see the line in bold is moving to the left? So the x values are getting smaller than negative 2. So the first inequality would be x is smaller than negative 2. Okay, now we're going to look at the other one. So when x is equal to 7, this time the graph is moving to the right. So the x values are getting larger. So the other inequality would be x is greater than 7. And that's it. In the next question, it says solve 1 minus 3x multiplied by 2x plus 1 is less than 0. Remember in the last question, I said it was a good idea to do a sketch of the quadratic and work out where the quadratic crosses the x-axis. And I did that by first forming an equation and putting the quadratic equal to y. So I'm going to put this equal to y so that is now my equation. Now, in this question, it's quite nice because it's already in its factorized form. So we don't have to do that factorizing step, okay? Next, we put the value of y equal to 0, as that will give us an equation that we can work out the values of x, and so where the quadratic crosses the x-axis, okay? So maybe you can just see that the values are x is negative 1/2 or x equals positive 1/3, okay? If you can't quite spot them, I'll just explain quickly how I got those values. This is an equation and it's equal to 0. Remember when you multiply a number by 0, the answer is always 0? Well, here, what you have to do is put one of the brackets equal to 0. So, say this one, for example. So that if this was 0 and this was a number, you're timesing them together, it would give you 0. And then afterwards, put the other bracket equal to 0. So that this is 0 and this would be a number, so 0 times a number would also give you 0. Okay, so basically you put each bracket equal to 0 and then solve each mini equation separately. So let's take the first bracket, so that 1 minus 3x is equal to 0. Now if I was solving this equation, I would probably move the negative 3x over to the right, and then I would divide both sides by 3. So x is equal to a third. So that gives you one of the solutions. Then if we take this bracket here, so 2x plus 1 is equal to 0. I'm going to do the same thing, so I'm just solving this equation. So I'm going to subtract 1 on both sides. So I have negative 1, and then divide by 2, which is how I get the negative 1/2. Okay, so these are the 2 points where the quadratic crosses the x-axis. Now, watch out, because on this question, the quadratic isn't this way up. It's actually the other way up. And you can see that by expanding the brackets at the beginning of the question. Now remember I said the parabola is this way up if it's positive x squared, and the other way if it's negative x squared. So you're only interested in the sign of the x squared term. So you don't have to expand all of the brackets. You just need to look at this part here. Okay, because that's the part that gives you the x squared. So if I multiply negative 3x with positive 2x, I get negative 6x squared. So because this is negative, I need to draw the graph the other way up in this question. Okay, so it's going to look like this. And now I'm just going to label where the graph crosses the x-axis. So positive a third and negative a half. Now, the inequality in this question says smaller than 0. Remember I said when it's smaller than 0, you're interested in the part of the graph that's below the x-axis. Okay, so this time I'm going to shade these sections on my graph. Okay, and now I need to work out what the inequalities are going to look like. So if I take this point here, when x is equal to negative a half, you should be able to see that this part is to the left. I'm moving to the left when x is smaller than negative a half. So that gives me the first inequality. X is smaller than negative a half. If we take the other point here, when x is equal to a third, this time I'm moving to the right. And as I move to the right along the x-axis, the x values are getting larger. So all the values of x this way will be larger than a third. Okay, so that is the answer to this question. Just one little point I wanted to make before I finish. If there had been an equal sign on the inequality, don't forget to put the equal sign here at the end as well, so that you're including those points where it crosses the x-axis.